Could it be that I've changed my mentality? I've started to rethink about the crossover vehicle and, well, distance myself from the good old SUV days, instead going with more of a CUV mentality. Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now, it's hard to stay away from this CUV segment. After all, much of what I've test drove lately has been just that. And even my Chevy Tahoe has begun to wonder where I've been, because those squared off lines really are giving way to something a little bit more curvaceous. Now behind me is one such offering, the 2017 Kia Sorento. And something I've come to find is, well, my mentality that crossovers are always small, quirky, and weird, well, it's given way to something a little bit bigger. Now, truth be told, my change of opinion has to be the fact that, well, the CUVs are changing themselves. The Sorento just a decade ago was, well, ugly. It just didn't look good, look quirky, and, well, even the Tahoes back then were bigger, better, and prettier. This now is starting to redefine my mentality, and it all starts on the outside. Now, what I like is it's somewhat SUV-ish. It's not too minivan-esque, it's not too Chrysler Pacifica, has just enough softening around the edges. Also isn't massive, so it doesn't really feel like you're driving, well, a behemoth, which is typical for what I typically like. Now on the outside, it definitely has some refinement. Where you see that is in some chrome, some nice curves, nice tight body lines, which even the bigger SUVs are going back to. Those days of the Cadillac Escalades with all that cladding, well, now they're starting to plain Jane it. Are they starting to want to be, well, a CUV themselves? As you sweep down, you're going to see body color all the way around. Again, the chrome is here and there, not too blingy, and really lets me know this vehicle is, well, somewhat regal. Now, what truly surprised me is when we get on the inside and see the biggest of offerings. Now, my predisposition to crossover vehicles had a lot to do with, well, some of the early offerings, as well as associating crossovers more with compact offerings, maybe Honda CR-Vs, RAV4s that really didn't equal to, well, my Chevy Tahoe. But then enter the Kia Sorento, and it helps me etch-a-sketch my brain, help me shake it out and forget about what I've seen before and really start anew. And where you see that is in by the numbers. Now, overall, this vehicle isn't small, easily creeping way into the mid-size segment, around about 187 inches, wheelbase fairly stretched at 109. Now, what you're also going to see is decent numbers everywhere else. Overall height about 5.5 feet tall. Now, what does that mean? Well, those are decent SUV numbers. So just by taking the S and substituting for a C doesn't mean I should, well, run the other way. Instead, I should, well, take a moment to be impressed with the offering you see here. This last number I truly like is ground clearance, because after all, when you go to a crossover, sometimes it's, well, too sedan-esque and not anywhere near utilitarian. This one really creeping up to about 7.5 inches, giving you modest ingress inside, but definitely plenty of height to get through the mud. Something that steered me clear of crossovers had to do with the fact that it had lots of drivability, but very little utilitarianism, which basically means it didn't have a lot of work ethic. Well, surprisingly, the Sorento does, and it all starts with the grip at the four corners. Now, this is the all-wheel drive version. That, compared to my own Chevy Tahoe, which is front-wheel drive, that one has less grip at the four corners, where this one truly stands out. Now, the other part is really, can it hold its own weight, and can it have some pulling power? And this one certainly does, stepping up to the fuller size V6. And what that basically means is that trailer sitting in the back definitely has something to couple up to. So what lies beneath this hood that delivers so much power? Well, specifically a 3.3 liter V6 engine. Now, it's going to deliver around about 290 horses and 252 foot-pounds of torque. Now, in the front-wheel drive version, that's going to have a towing capacity of around about 3,500 pounds, but for the as-tested all-wheel drive model, that creeped it up to closer to 5,000 pounds and, well, could give that trailer a run for its money. Now, if you do prefer a little bit of less power, you can go with the less spirited 2.4 liter inline four-cylinder. Now, it's going to deliver around about 185 horses and 178 foot-pounds of torque, and, well, could be a little bit more fuel efficient. Now, what sets the Sorento apart not only from its power plant and pulling power, but also its grille warfare. Up here looks like a lot of kind of rigidness that's kind of throwing its anger at you, and, well, the mean-spirited headlights are really grimacing and, well, sending Tahoes off the road and really taking notice. Well, that's hopefully what happens. Now, what you also see is a huge flat, broad grille versus some narrowing, sculpting, and protrusion that you see in some other compact models. This one really pronounced. What I also like is, of course, body color, a little bit of chrome here and there, and a little bit of lower fascia. What you also see is a whole lot of lighting systems. Over there on the headlights, you really see a nice menace, but down below are really a huge bank of some lower lighting as well. But basically this whole front end is set off and starts to make me think, well, this isn't a crossover after all. One key feature with any vehicle really starts well with the key, pun intended, basically making life so much easier with the invention of the smart key system, pretty much meaning you leave it in your pocket and forget about it. And for a vehicle that delivers really the utilitarian side of things, you're typically going to be loaded in your hands with items, and you're going to want to get into this vehicle with ease. And it all starts with an elbow smack or whatever to this front door, simply pressing the button, unlock the vehicle, and climb in with ease. Now, another feature really comes down to the lockability of the fill-up area, basically preventing vandalism or theft in this particular region. And what I like on the Sorento is it is always locked. Basically a release button there on the dash pops this open when you need it. The other thing I like to replace is, of course, the good old cap system. Now, the Sorento has that, but eventually a lot of vehicles are going with the capless, just one less step. Now, one thing you'll notice as you look from the back end of the vehicle really is the overall height. It's not too tall, which makes you feel a little bit more comfortable when you go into places like parking decks or anything with kind of low overhangs. Bigger SUVs start to, of course, make this a lot taller, and well, just feel like it's going to be a scraping affair. Now, swing around to the business end of the Sorento, what you're going to see is somewhat straightforward styling, and really no apologies here. The overall design is somewhat simplified and straightforward, but well, not ugly. Now, what I like is the rear spoiler, somewhat pronounced. You really see it from the profile. Huge bank of glass and pretty much body color all the way around, with just a little bit of stylizing when it comes to the rear tail lights. Now, there is a lot of safety built in here on the Sorento. First, with this 360 view, pretty much giving that bird's eye view with cameras everywhere you look, and also backup camera back here, of course, really allowing you to get that see if anything's in the way. Now, lastly is just the operation, and what you're going to find is the Sorento makes, well, life just a little bit easier. And it all starts with simply the press of a button. That's going to take this rear hatch up out of the way in fairly quick operation. Doesn't take long at all. Now, the overall height here is not really a head banging affair. It's just up out of the way from my 6-foot+ frame. Decent handle to pull it back down, or simply use the key fob, or well, this button here, to let it go down on its own. Now, as for spacing, what you're going to find is around about 11 cubic feet of storage back here behind the third row. Now, as you lay this down, the third row, that's going to be more than triple the amount of space, giving you tons of cargo options, especially as you move forward. Now, diving a little bit better into the cargo area, first thing you'll notice is the 50-50 split here on this 3-row vehicle, really allowing you to kind of modify the cargo spacing when you need. You also notice that the headrest does tumble forward, really helping minimize blind spots when no one's back here. Now, to fold these down, real easy, one tug here on the strap tumbles it forward. Now, what's great about this is it truly makes for a nice cargo floor back here at the back. Even better is you do have a little bit of cargo underneath. This is where you find the operation for the car jack, but also a nice little space to maybe keep things in here all the time. Now, it's not rocket science to fold seats down, but it's helpful to note kind of the various operations. And what you'll find back here at the very back is these handles on both sides. And what that does is tumble the second row with ease. Simply pull right there and they'll lay flat for one seamless cargo. Now, the second row is a 60-40 kind of split, allows you to do different configurations, but it's right here to simply fold them down. Now, some other things to look at while we're way back here at the back is really just some operations for the backseat drivers. First, going to be a little storage on both sides, a cup holder as well for both occupants. And what you also find is control for air back here. Basically allow you to control the fan speed or simply just turn it on or off. Normally when I look at comfort, I start in the front row, but this second row looks so inviting. This is where I begin, and really starts with the overall aromatherapy inside this vehicle. And what I'm referring to is kind of the regal smell, the genuine leather. That compared to other vehicles that really have a heavy plastic smell, this one just smells so much above the competition. Secondly, really is the overall feel back here. The seat cushions really are nice and comfortable. The leather enveloping, and really the outer occupants really getting individualized attention. Even still some room for a middle occupant, especially considering there's no hump here in the floor. Now, when you look at the legroom numbers, what you're going to find is around about 44 inches up front, 39 here in the second row, and not too shabby, around about 31 inches in the back. Now, something I've always compared to is really Jeep Grand Cherokees. I've test drove that many times, and this vehicle pretty much falling within that realm. And what this has that the Jeep doesn't is, well, that third row. The Jeep always falling short when it comes to occupancy numbers, and well, you could argue that, well, that's just not enough room. But what I find, when you can squeeze a few people back there to get everyone to the show, that much better. Now, what you also notice in the second row, that these aren't really just backseat drivers, but are part of the vehicle when it comes to the design. And where it starts also is with the sunshades. Now, I call these limo shades, but what's helpful about them is they really block out light, make things feel a little bit cooler in the back seat, but also privatize the backseat drivers. Now, as when you look at the overall comfort, again, individualized attention, and you're able to basically position people and cargo in one fell swoop, and it's really made easy with simply just the pull of a handle down here on the hip side. Now, that can either add ingress to the third row or simply tumble seats when you need to load cargo. Chargeability is a key feature to keep everyone happy, but you never know what it's going to take, well, for them to plug in. For the Sorento, they give you all the offerings: a USB connection, even a household outlet, and a traditional car plug-in. Should the second row only have 2 occupants, what's great about that is there is a center console giving you decent elbow support and even places for their beverage. Sometimes it's great to let the light in or even see the stars, and Sorento does that quite well with one huge panoramic ceiling, basically allowing the light to shine in with the simple press of a button. Front occupants definitely get the royal treatment, and it all starts with the overall design, ergonomics, and feel, especially in the front captain's chairs. Now, they have nice cushioned leather appointments similar to the back seat, but you could say that these, well, are so much more plush, really wrapping the driver and passenger in total comfort. To breathe life into the Sorento, basically it's a one press button and everything roars and starts and illuminates with ease. And the first thing you'll notice is really the huge touchscreen system. Now, this quadrant-like display really houses everything in one view, but if you prefer, simply press and it takes it to a bigger screen. Really, the climate control, for example, really nice and prominent. And of course, this is duplicated down below. If you get lost, simply press the home button. Typical navigation you've seen on other systems. Here you do have shortcuts, and everything really positioned up across the top. Symmetric knobs for volume and tune select. But what I prefer is really to bring up the entertainment, because it allows you to have multiple presets and even dial in like the old school method. Down below is kind of the climate central area, and really has the Boeing 747 kind of appeal. Now, there's not too many buttons, and really everything is nice and simplified and where you expect it. First off is really the temperature control, and that dials in your specific temperature, and where that relates is really right there on the screen. As you dial it, it will tell you the temperature readout, and you can simply navigate to your comfort. Now, what you also find is really right here in the middle is the fan speed. Now, I'd argue that this would be better suited for a knob, because it would help add some symmetry, as well as basically I like to control it better than the push button. It also have a natural place to put the mode select, which is typically found on a central knob like that. Now, down below is some other functions for climate, the heated and cooled seats for both front occupants, as well as a heated steering wheel. Now, one thing we found on other vehicles that when you get down to this nice little niche, well, they fall short, because the only thing they do here is store. Well, in this case, they have it all, right down to the power chargers, USB connection, and auxiliary jack, plus some extra storage as you charge the devices. Between the front occupants, you'll of course find the transmission, the good old gear shifter right here, dual cup holders, and some various buttons for, well, driving mode, which basically gives you some options between sport and normal, as well as parking sensors should you want to turn them off, and even better, a nice shortcut to see the camera views so you can see around the vehicle. When it comes to the gauge cluster, it's going to be a combination of analog and digital readout, and it's going to give you lots of information. And what's really pronounced is right there in the center. Of course, the digital like readout for the speedometer, and specifically the numeric reading. Now, of course, you can transition all the various choices by simply toggling through using the settings and controls on the steering wheel. Now, as for the steering wheel, what you're going to find is those controls are on the right side, and as well as the adaptive cruise control, pretty much allowing you to kind of set the vehicle in traffic and it will do the rest. Now on the left side is for entertainment, and what I like is the intuitive toggling. Now this basically allows you to kind of roll your finger across the dial, really setting the volume with ease. Now what I also like is basically the selectability when it comes to your presets by simply toggling up and down, and you do have the various modes that you can choose as well. To the left of the steering wheel on the dash, this is just some other shortcuts if you need to know where they are. This is going to help illumination inside the vehicle, as well as turning off the blind spot awareness, which pretty much I like to leave on, no reason to turn it off. One thing I'm not a big fan of is lane departure, as I tend to sway just a little bit, so this is pretty much going to go off all the time. If you need to turn on the power supply in the back, just simply press there. The driver's seat is power and basically allows you to have presets here on the side, which I like because when different drivers get in, that can make well for changes in the seating position. So simply memorize them, set them, and forget it. Now overall, this vehicle has tons of USB. Specifically, there's one up front underneath the dash, one in the back for the back seat drivers, and one centered here between the front occupants in the center console. Now what's interesting is it looks like it's just a standard old power supply, but once you pop this open, what you're going to reveal is the good old standard USB connection, which is much more helpful than the good old cigarette outlet. Now it does it for this edition of Road Warrior and a test drive behind the wheel of the 2017 Kia Sorento, a CUV that helps me see myself inside and, well, makes me want to scoot away from the SUVs altogether. And where this vehicle truly stood out is, well, etch-a-sketch and erasing my brain from what I previously thought and understood. And it helps me understand that, well, a crossover vehicle can truly look the part of an SUV when it comes to towing power, interior volume, and, well, overall design. This vehicle truly delivered. Now, as always, I'd like to thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.